This is Anchor, and welcome to another episode of the Krytan Chronicler, the show where people roleplay and I talk about it. So if you're wondering what the intro is all about, well, these guys are about to explain. Or if you don't like reading, I will explain for you. Basically, Eckhart, who is the human plot device, as I've come to think of him, he essentially is there to help us meet other role players and figure out what their characters are all about. However, this time it's going to be a little different, since there was a big event going on in the game at the time of this video. So I decided it would be a good time to incorporate that into role-playing and see how mixing gameplay elements with role-playing elements can be a lot of fun. So that's exactly what you're going to see here. Eckhart is just regrouping with the Tyrian Adventure League, who we've run into in the past. And to give a little context to what's going on, from Eckhart's point of view at least, he was, as you saw from the previous episodes, working with the German Priory, living with the German Priory, and researching with them as well. And in the midst of that, this huge attack broke out at Lion's Arch. Scarlet, aka the Salad, as Nihilus refers to her, was a big villain, high-profile villain in the world of Tyria who attacked Lion's Arch with a huge army. So of course, a big event like this happens, the German Priory is going to know about it. And more than that, they're going to have to do something about it. They're sort of responsible for protecting Tyria. At least they're one of the orders responsible for protecting it. So when this attack broke out, you can imagine they would be all up in arms, frantically panicking about what to do and how to react. And of course they're going to have to coordinate with all the other orders, such as the Vigil and the Order of Whispers as well. So it would make sense then for Eckhart, since he's working with the German Priory, he would take a little message from them to the Vigil to kind of coordinate their attacks. That's why he's here at the Vigil, kind of delivering a message. And unexpectedly, he runs into the Tyrian Adventure League. And of course, not actually unexpected. I did know they were going to be here, but from Eckhart's perspective, it was kind of a nice surprise to run into them again, as that's what they're talking about right now, discussing what to do. So I'm going to shut my mouth hole and let you figure out what's going on for yourself.
I could outrun a centaur.
Refreshing. You want a combat chassis and an energy amplifier, but no weapons? What, are you crazy?
Logic circuits are nominal. Is this design feasible?
Yeah, the amplifier. That'll take a while. I'll be honest, never had a Gollum customer.
Will this irregular customer interaction delay delivery?
No, I don't usually ask this, but what's all this for? I mean, the line guard's watching me close. You ain't gonna kill us all in some Gollum uprising, right?
Negative. Non-hostile intent.
You better be right. This design of yours. You want to take a beating but not dish it out?
Affirmative.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to be asking for payment in advance.
Error. I lack the sufficient funds.
And go away. I don't work for free. Well, except for the Lion Guard these days. Damn that kid.
So I'm going to take advantage of this moment while Eckhart steps away to fulfill his in-character obligations. Obviously, he didn't actually have a letter to deliver to the Vigil, but I needed an excuse for him to be here, and it made enough sense. Now, of course, this was a planned event. The Tyrian Adventure League, as well as all the players really in the game, knew that this attack was going to happen because the game developers told us it was going to happen. But our characters, on the other hand, didn't know. This is a complete surprise to our characters. So we thought it would be fun to incorporate that into the story of our characters, as this is a huge event that would affect everyone in the world of Tyria, including these guys. So that's why we decided to get together. We're just going to sort of discuss our strategy here on going into the city and helping some of the survivors there.
I pray to the spirits of the wild. They rarely end.
I warned Keel. Warned them all. I told them Scarlet was going to attack the city. Did the council listen? No. Because of them, your friends, your neighbors, dead. Now I know why he's Captain Magnus the Bloody Handed. There's the blood of all those innocent people in Lion's Arch on his hands.
Heaven Nashblade?
What is it? Shouldn't you be failing at your job somewhere?
You've been hereby conscripted to Lion Guard service under General Emergency Statute 14.
You're joking. Someone tell me this sorry idiot is playing a joke on me.
For the duration of the emergency,
make your life
you and Black
easy.
Lion trading post agents will act as deputy
It's a good
quartermasters,
day.
outfitting all active personnel.
And what if I refuse? What if I pull up stakes and leave you suckers in the dust?
Considering you are now technically a Lion Guard supply officer, desertion would mean confiscation of your wares and summary execution.
So, it's either get robbed blind by you Lion Guard or get hanged?
Firing squad, actually. And it's not you or us anymore, Quartermaster Nashblade. Speaking of which, we need 24 swords, 12 axes, 20 shields, and 40 rifles.
Just tell me one thing. Keel, he's dead, right? Come on, give the guy good news.
She and Captain Magnus are at a relief camp to the south. And your deputizing was Captain Keel's idea.
Of course it was.
So this dialogue that you may have noticed in the
How are your
background
endeavors
there,
progressing?
this is all new dialogue. Everything
So nice
in
to
regards
see.
to this event is brand new storylines and brand new dialogue that was created for this event. And this isn't something that happens on a loop like other events. You know, when you're walking past a settlement, it gets attacked. But then, of course, that settlement gets attacked every hour or so. This is a one-time event that sort of took place over the course of 2 weeks. If you played the game at all, you probably already know all about it. But as it was one of the bigger events to happen in the game. So, of course, it made sense for us to roleplay through it, since this is a very unique event. It made sense that it would affect our characters in a very serious way. You could see some of them were talking in the previous conversation about, you know, they were worried about their houses and worried about people that they know and neighbors and innocent people in the city getting hurt.
It's a
And
good
so
day.
it made sense for us to get together, form a party, and actually roleplay through it as opposed to just playing through it. Which is why the Tyrian Adventure League is getting together for this big attack they're about to launch. And you're about to see some of the advantages of playing with a guild, with a role-playing guild in particular, because you really have access to special events like this, and you can really organize in different ways than if you were just a single player looking for a party. And here I recommended that we move a bit farther away from the waypoint, since it looked like a lot of different players were kind of warping in for this event. And as a result, there was a lot of noise and white noise dialogue in the area, so it was hard to follow what everyone was saying. But as I mentioned in the past, in situations like this where there are a lot of characters, all you have to do is focus on the dialogue that pertains to your character in particular. You don't have to worry about what everyone's saying. And if you miss something, again, you can just pretend that your character missed something. You know, you're only human. Unless you're an android, you're not going to hear what everyone says all the time. You're only human, or Char, or Sylvari, or Norn, or whatever you are. You're flawed. You're an imperfect character. And it doesn't have to be like perfect Shakespearean dialogue all the time. It's better if you treat it more like a real people having a real conversation. And here I'm just filling a little banter with Eckhart to give him more of a real personal connection to what's going on in the city. I made up this character in his life, a mentor from Lion's Arch. This is something that he mentioned before as well, because of course Eckhart, as we've all seen in the previous episodes, he's on a bit of a journey to explore more of the Tyria and to learn from the other cultures. And he moved to Lion's Arch specifically to do that and to learn and hone his engineering skills. So while I was in Lion's Arch, I just made up this other character, not a real player or anything, but a character that he would know and could stay with while he's in Lion's Arch and hopefully learn a thing or two about engineering while he's there. So that way I can, when I'm talking to other people, and they ask me questions about my character and what he's doing in Lion's Arch, then I have these details to fall back on, so I don't have to make something up on the spot. I know the name of this character, I know what they do for a living, and I know how I met them.
Never leave a comrade behind.
Welcome, recruits. You now join the proud ranks of the Vigil. Our mission is simple. We are here to defend those threatened by the dragons. In the upcoming months, you'll be trained to face enemies that make most men flee in terror. You'll fight nightmares. You'll bring hope in the darkness. You'll stand vigil on the line between life and death. This is no small task.
Now you can see I had to play a little dumb here to stay true to Eckhart's character. But as Nihilus has mentioned in the previous episode, he said he had a mate who is with the Vigil. And that's really all he mentioned about this other character. I mean, I didn't even know if this person he was referring to was a real player-created character, or if it was just a made-up character, similar to the one I made up in Lion's Arch. But here you're getting to see exactly who he's talking about, and Eckhart, a little dumbfounded, looking around, not knowing what he's talking about, takes a second to realize that he's actually referring to this female human character. And so, again, this isn't something that's, impossible in the world of Tyria, but you have to also play it as realistically as you would if you were a character like Eckhart, who hasn't been exposed to much of the world. I mean, before, not too long ago, he hadn't even met any Char, so you can imagine he'd be surprised to realize that Char and humans can have relationships together. And it is still a surprise at the same time, though, because humans and Char have been at war, as I mentioned, for centuries. So it does portray these characters. It does tell you a bit about their characters, that they're bold enough to have a relationship between these two races that are so at odds. And you can imagine that their characters would also face a lot of confusion with the example you see here with Eckhart, but also hostility towards the relationship. There's another dynamic that you don't get to see on the surface. You kind of have to dig a little, and you find out these interesting things about all these different characters.
Welcome, recruits. You now join the proud ranks of the Vigil. Our mission is simple. We are here to defend those threatened by the dragons. In the upcoming months, you'll be trained to face enemies that make most men flee in terror. You'll fight nightmares. You'll bring hope in the darkness. You'll stand vigil on the line between life and death. This is no small task.
And here, Nihilus is just introducing the two founders of the Tyrian Adventure League, the two humans you see there. And if you look at their names, you'll notice they have the same last name. It's because they are a married couple. Well, their characters are anyways. And so there are a lot of different ways to form relationships with characters. I mean, it definitely enriches the story the more relationships your character has with other people. And again, it doesn't have to be romantic relationships, but you have to have some sort of association with other people to give your character a place in the world that they inhabit. And now I've mentioned Eckhart has, his mentor back in, or rather his master back in Divinity's Reach. He has a mentor in Lion's Arch, but these are made up characters. They're not actual players that I can interact with. And so the best thing to do is to make as many different connections with actual characters, like player characters, so that you get more involved in intricate interactions, which really enhances the role-playing as well. And there can be different ways to set up these kinds of relationships. I mean, some people will do it over like forums online, or they'll do it out of character, like they'll meet a character, but out of character they'll discuss with that player like directions for their two characters to go together. But the other way is just spontaneously. I mean, all of the players that I've met, I met just by role-playing, and we didn't really have much of a plan set out. I mean, I didn't message them saying, hey, will you be my new best friend or anything. It just made sense for what we were doing at the time for these relationships to build and evolve, and that's how Eckhart got to meet Nihilus. He was just a stranger in a tavern once, but now they're companions heading into battle. And a lot of these members of the League, I'm sure, also met the same way, just by playing together and role-playing, and until it made sense for their character to form this group with other people. But again, that's not the only way you have to do it. That's just my personal preference, and it makes it a bit more unexpected if you don't know how your characters are gonna work together, or whether they'll get along at all. It makes it more unpredictable, and it can lead to all sorts of unexpected things. I mean, I can definitely tell you that when I met Nihilus and Skull and other members of the Tyrian Adventure League, I did not expect to be going into battle with them in such a big event like this.
Welcome, recruits. You now join the proud ranks of the Vigil. Our mission is simple. We are here to defend those threatened by the dragons. In the upcoming months, you'll be trained to face enemies that make most men flee in terror. You'll fight nightmares. You'll bring hope in the darkness. You'll stand vigil on the line between life and death. This is no small task.
So what Eckhart's talking about here in terms of getting his medical supplies ready, he's essentially preparing for battle as I'm, as a player, preparing for battle as well. I mean, when you role play through events like this, you still have to keep in mind the gameplay elements necessary to actually survive. You're still going to be fighting, you're still going to be using your abilities. So when you're role-playing, you don't necessarily pay attention to those things as much. You're mostly paying attention to like the story and how your character feels and what they're saying. But if you're in a battle, it's going to make sense both in character and out of character to have some sort of strategy prepared. So I like to do this in character. A lot of people will do it out of character, like they'll in party chat or in a separate chat box, they'll go over the strategy of like how much DPS they can do and how much damage or hit points they have, and all these out of character elements they'll discuss and strategize with. However, I like to do it all in character because you can still make sense of it in character. I mean, Eckhart, even though he's mostly an explorer, he's also an engineer with actual engineering tools that can be useful in a battle. So you can see here he's talking about he does have some medical training. He knows alchemy, and therefore he can make elixirs that can actually be useful to people in battle. So even those are just abilities that I have on my command window at the bottom there. They make sense for the story as well, that he would use them. He would use his elixirs and his med kits in a battle. So you can still strategize without breaking character, as long as you talk with the voice of your character. And luckily, it was with a good group of role players who really pay attention to what your character is saying and who your character is. And so this other player noticed that, you know, Eckhart, he's talking about his medical abilities, his medical knowledge, and so decided to connect the dots between him and this other character who seems to be injured, who was
welcome, recruits.
most likely injured in the battle at Lion's Arch.
Our mission is simple. We are here to defend those threatened by the dragons. In the upcoming months, you'll be trained to face enemies that make most men flee in terror. You'll fight nightmares. You'll bring hope in the darkness. You'll stand vigil on the line between life and death. This is no small task.
They need food and medical supplies. We can't fail them.
And I really like what this role player is doing here, because you have to remember, when you go into a battle, most of the time you're not going to walk out of it, you know, unscarred or unscathed. I mean, if you're role-playing a battle, then you have to consider the weight of that battle and all the danger and risk that's involved. And so this char has come from the attack on Lion's Arch. She was probably there when the attack began. And of course, you're not going to pretend that you just made it out of there like it was nothing, like a walk in the park. You know, from your character's perspective, they came very close to death. So you have to keep those things in mind when you're portraying them. And now I intentionally kind of go easy on that sometimes with Eckhart, just because he's not the smartest or most clever when it comes to danger. He's a little aloof in that regard. But again, that's also why he tends to fight alongside other people, so that they can take the blunt of the damage and he can observe from a safe distance.
I followed the light, of course.
You may have noticed also Eckhart was mentioning that he needed to be paired up with someone who could hold their own in battle. And again, that's me talking half in character and half out of character, because for the sake of gameplay, you know, the character that I've created in terms of his battle capabilities can't fight that well on his own. He's good at dealing out damage, but at the same time he's not the most thick-skinned. He doesn't have the highest hit points. But I can't say that. I can't say, oh, I only have 4,000 hit points, I need someone with a higher defense rating than me, because that wouldn't make sense for Eckhart to say that, unless I was talking out of character. So instead of strategizing out of character, again, I tried to take that element of strategy and speak it in character with the voice of Eckhart in a way that makes sense, because again, he's an explorer, he's not a fighter. So if he's gonna join up with a squad or a small team, then he's gonna have to be in a team with someone who makes up for his deficiencies, you know, someone who has a much better armor, or who's much thicker skinned, or who has a higher attack damage or something like that. And so, yeah, it makes sense in character and out of character, but you just have to make sure that you are careful in the way that you word it, so that you're not breaking character or ruining the roleplay at all. And worst comes to worst, if you can't say it in character, then just type it into the brackets or in party chat or out of character somehow. And then, as long as everyone knows what you mean, then that's all that really matters.
Welcome, recruits. You now join the proud ranks of the Vigil. Our mission is simple. We are here to defend those threatened by the dragons. In the upcoming months, you'll be trained to face enemies that make most men flee in terror. You'll fight nightmares. You'll bring hope in the darkness. You'll stand vigil on the line between life and death.
One of the things I love about guild form role-playing is you get all these different connections, which you were seeing there. I mean, they had all these inside jokes that they were telling, and you know, referring to all these past memories that they had together. When you interact with a group of people like this and you do it on a regular basis, you can really form relationships that are realistic, as opposed to the relationships that your character might have. I mean, I know the human storyline has few missions where you have to rescue your sister, or depending on what background you chose. That's the one I chose anyway, and I didn't feel anything for it because, you know, there was no history. There was no history between my character and my character's parents. There was no history between him and his sister. It was all just made up on the spot. You all just figured it out as you were playing. Whereas when you roleplay with a bunch of people, you actually form the memories that you're supposed to be having. So you're not referring to a memory of something that never happened. You're referring to a memory of something that happened in the story that you were telling with another person. And it gives it so much more urgency and so much more importance to everything that you do. I mean, if you were just a player sitting in front of a computer on your keyboard playing with other people over the internet, it doesn't really matter what happens to you in the game. You die, you just respawn. You know, you lose a piece of loot, then you just buy another. However, to your character, all these things are extremely important. I mean, to these characters, Lion's Arch was their home, to a lot of them anyways. So seeing all this destruction means so much more to them than if they were just a player who came here occasionally to craft items. You can even think of it as, if you've ever read or seen Lord of the Rings, there's the big battle at Helm's Deep, and the reason that battle is, you know, so epic is because of the story behind it and the context behind it and all the characters that you grow to care for, and you are really concerned with what happens to them. That's what makes the battle seem so much more urgent and more thrilling in a way, because you don't know what's going to happen, but you really care about the outcome. And that's kind of how it felt to go into this battle as a character, you know, and you were really charging to the unknown and to this huge battle where anything could happen, you know. Your characters can really come away scarred from the things that could happen here, which made it that much more exciting. And as I mentioned before, not all these players are going to be role players that you're playing with. It doesn't matter. From your perspective, these guys are all citizens of Lion's Arch, or they're members of the Lion's Guard, or they're members of the Vigil, Order, Whispers, what have you. All that matters is your perspective and your character's perspective. Whether or not they're actually role players is irrelevant. And again, if you see someone in the chat type something that doesn't make sense, like here someone just wrote TY, which is just short for thank you, or someone says, oh, there's so much lag, which obviously their character wouldn't be saying that. To you, it doesn't matter. They didn't actually say that. To you, they weren't role-playing, and therefore nothing they say has to be even acknowledged. You just ignore it, because it's all mostly dependent on your imagination anyways. So if it's all in your imagination, then it doesn't really matter what they say. Unless you want to pretend that they're crazy and that they're just mumbling nonsense. That works too. And so here, as I mentioned before, Nihilus was a bit concerned about what may have happened to his house. I should point out that this isn't actually the player-owned house. You can't purchase property in the game or anything like that. But for the purpose of role-playing, he basically decided out of character that this was going to be his character's house, so that when he talks about it or he talks to other people, that he'd have something in the game world to point to and say, yes, that is my house, that's where I live, even though he's never actually been inside it as a player. But because it's all mostly in your imagination, you just sort of work around what the game gives you. And as a result of that, you get a real personal connection to what's going on. I mean, Nihilus, he was angry before, but you can imagine how angry he is now seeing what's happened to the place where he lived. And I really love the way that this player is portraying his character in this moment, because you can see there's all this fighting going on right behind him. He's just standing there. He's so angry, he's speechless. Like, he has no words left. And this is a moment, a nice little character development that you wouldn't get if that wasn't really his house, you know, if he hadn't included that part of his story into his character. And I really like that play between Alessa and Nihilus there, where Alessa sort of reads his mind a little bit, and it goes to show, despite the boundaries of their different races, that they do have a genuine relationship and a genuine understanding of each other. Just because Alessa looking at Nihilus, you know, standing there speechless, she's like, okay, so you're gonna go on a rampage now, right? And he's like, yes, I'm going on a rampage. And it's that kind of mutual understanding that happens when you build rapport between characters.
That's the stuff.
I'd also like to point out that this area that we're fighting in, this is all part of Lion's Arch, like the actual Lion's Arch that you've seen before. They've taken that instance, or that city, and transformed it into a war zone, the game developers, I mean. So this isn't a separate area, or separate instance, or quest that you go on, or you can choose to go on, or choose to go to the regular Lion's Arch. They've destroyed the original Lion's Arch. You can't go back there anymore. Now this is all that's there, is this war zone. And I like that they did that because it gives it so much more permanence and so much more realism. Like, what's happening is really affecting everyone. You can't choose which characters are affected by this battle. Everyone's affected by it. So it makes it role-playing so much easier. Because you can imagine if this was just a separate instance, or like a quest that just happened once and then it was over, then, you know, you might be talking about it in character, but just because your character has, you know, witnessed the Battle of Lion's Arch doesn't mean that everyone else has. You know, maybe someone else hasn't gone on that quest yet. So you say, oh my gosh, I can't believe Lion's Arch was destroyed. And they're going to be like, what are you talking about? I was just there 3 minutes ago, it's fine. You're going to run into all these character-breaking paradoxes when you talk to people. So the fact that they made it permanent and made it affect everyone in the game makes it that much easier when you're role-playing, because everyone has the same experience and they all refer to the same experience. So as our heroes finish cleaning up this cave of Scarlet's minions, I was going to take a bit of a break to talk about a newsletter I found. It's a role-playing newsletter called the Tyrian Herald, and it has a really interesting premise. Basically, the newsletter is written in character, so it's written from the perspective of characters in the world of Guild Wars 2, sent around the Tarnished Coast and Pick and Square role-playing servers. And essentially they submit articles about events in the world, or they'll do interviews and biographies of characters created by role players. and it's all in character, so you won't be hearing about, you know, the latest patch or how to make your engineer do a higher DPS. You know, it's all character based, and it's a great way to find out about different characters and the really cool, interesting things that are happening in the role-playing world. Because it's not just the game designers who get to create really interesting and epic events like this. The role players too are also creating their own stories. So they share some of that on the Tyrian Herald. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a link to it below this video, so you should check it out. And if you're a role player on either Tarnished Coast or Pick and Swear, you should definitely consider submitting an article as well if your characters get up to any shenanigans. I'm sure they'd like to hear about it. And that's all I'm going to say for now. The battle's just about to wrap up here. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope it's been edifying in any way, whether you're a role player or you're thinking about role playing. Again, I'm Anchor. This has been another episode of the Krytan Chronicler. We hope to see you again next time, and remember to keep on role playing.
Refreshing. Strong.
Yes, I'm ready to defeat anything. The air. Too poisonous. Get out of the city! That's an order!